Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Space Race, a game from Boardcubator that's about the, space race. This is a game where you're going to win by getting the most points as you simulate out being your different space agencies trying to get as much space research into space, first person to space, whatever abstracted form of, the space race that you're going to be going through. And you're going to be getting points in this game. That's how you win, as I said a minute ago. And points are going to come to you from a variety of different sectors in the game, both in the game, end of round scoring, different areas you want to be mindful of. From the various area control game that's going on in the breakthrough trackers, you try to get the most astronauts into different zones. From the various projects you're going to invest your astronauts in, slowly but surely adding astronauts to these various board spaces over here. As you play certain cards and do different things throughout the game, you're going to slowly unlock more and more different, zones over here, these projects that you're going to be trying to put your astronauts in, but other players can also be putting their astronauts in at the same time, trying to get further and further up the track and end up with as many astronauts as possible. You're going to want to be getting various cards into your labs. Cards are going to be a huge part of Space Race, as you can see over here, and those cards are going to be in a variety of different zones, from your hand, from your buildings, your agency, from the various investments, from your lab. Getting cards into your lab are going to score you a lot of points in various end-of-round scoring as you go through different scoring objectives as you go through there. You're also going to want to make sure that you have your control markers, your control cards, properly lined up with the various cards you put into your agency as you get your engine running in this game, because that will also score you points in the game. Now, the basic sequence of the game, is going to be a high-level overview of the various ways the game plays out, but the basic sequence is in every single game, every single round, you're going to be grabbing cards, you're going to have your hand of cards, and in general, you're going to be drawing a card from the deck, and then looking at your various cards, and then trying to decide which cards you want to put down. Let's go ahead and put some of these. I'm going to put 3 cards down into the unexplored universe. Now, the other players are going to do that as well. Let's go ahead and just simulate a few cards from the other players, and then we're going to shuffle it up, and we're going to draw a number of cards, depending on the player count, different number of cards, and put them out into the universe. So we have the unexplored universe, which we have no idea what's in there. Well, we have some idea because we put some of our cards into there. And then we have the actual universe. The universe is we're going to go ahead and put out 3 cards, matching them by their type, matching them to various zones. So we're going to put that over there. We're going to put this one over here. Again, matching the zones. Those are propaganda. We have space programs. And then we have one more card, which is going to go over here. Now, if those spots ever fill up, what you're always going to do is you're going to put your card into the leftmost space with the fewest number of cards. So it's going to go filling up across you go, and then starting off again until cards are picked, which can then change where cards go. And that's important because as cards cover other cards, those cards won't be available until the topmost cards are taken. From there, once we have a bit of a hint as to what's coming out of the space program, we're going to go ahead and look at our hands and pick cards. We're going to pick the various control cards that we want to play this round. You're going to have all players are going to start off with the same cards depending on the way you play the game. There's another advanced mode where you're going to have some differences in the way you play. But starting off with this, we're going to go ahead and pick a card, and that's going to determine what we do. So for example, I'm going to pick a number 3 propaganda card. There's going to be different factions over here, different types. You're going to have the propaganda, technology, space programs, and breakthroughs. And you have numbers on them as well as abilities on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and play that card over here. And then once we all reveal our cards, going in order from propaganda to technology to space programs to breakthroughs, we're going to resolve all the various cards. And then if 2 players play the same color, you resolve in initiative order, higher to lower, to determine which abilities you're going to activate in your entire agency. So in this case, we're at the start of the game. We don't have a lot going on, which means I'm going to go ahead and activate the control card itself. Now, all the cards have this symbology in it, which is a little bit complicated at first, but is really very simple once you pick it up. Every single card in this game, every time you show a symbol of what's going on, it's telling you where to take it from, what to take, and where to place it. In this case, we are taking from the universe, that's going to be this giant area over here, we are taking a propaganda card, and we're placing it into our agency. Simple enough, all the cards follow that basic formatting. So we're going to go ahead, and we will I'll go ahead and grab this card over here, and we're going to add it to our agency, but because it also has a yellow stripe, and because we're activating that card, we can go ahead and activate that one as well, which allows us to take a card from our hand, put 2 cards from our hand into our lab. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We have 2 cards left in our hand. We're just going to go ahead and put those straight into our lab over here. So that's the agency you're building up. As you go through, the next time I play a propaganda card, let's just skip forward a few rounds. Let's pretend these hadn't put there. And let's go ahead and put those over there. And let's say I go ahead and play my 1 propaganda, which will reactivate that row, as well as any other cards I take. So now when I take a card over here, next turn, I'm going to grab another card, put it into my row, and unfortunately I won't be able to activate this one because it doesn't have a yellow stripe across it, but I can activate that and that. You're slowly building out a longer and longer agency to utilize the abilities to utilize the string of abilities that occur across the row. Now from there's a whole bunch of other small things to manage, different abilities in terms of what the cards are actually doing. So let's take a look at some of these. We have the Project Gemini, which is going to allow us to move astronauts around in this breakthrough tracker here. Move astronauts from the breakthrough tracker, move an astronaut to the breakthrough tracker. So that gives us some flexibility as we compete for area control. We're going to have the ISS over here, which the ISS is going to allow us to give us a stripe in each of these, which can be helpful. Those are going to be points in every round that has, well, I guess every single round. Every round you're going to score points for the cards that match your control markers. So they're going to have this one over here. The ISS is going to be triggering points for us every single round, which can be very helpful. It's worth noting, by the way, you have a giant set of variety in terms of the projects you have access to, as well as the missions. There's going to be a variety of different options. So you're not faced with these static things that you see in front of you. Lots of things to mix up the experience. Along the way, every single time you fulfill one of these objectives on these cards. So for example, when we played a propaganda card to our agency, over here, we're going to go ahead and put one of our astronauts on this board, trying to manipulate the area control. I'm going to start this one off over here to get those 2 points over there. So you're placing these out on the board over here in order to get as much area control when you fulfill different cards, which is another thing you're being mindful of. You're going to rinse and repeat across the rounds of the game until you've eventually played all your cards, you've eventually gone through the various cycles, re-triggering your agency every single time you trigger based on different criteria. At the end of the round, you're going to score for different things in the game determined by these mission cards. So for example, this mission card says we're going to add a new project. We're going to flip over a new project over here. And then we're going to go ahead and score for our control cards over here. And then we're going to score for the area control over there. Each of these missions tells us what we're scoring for that round and how we're getting points. A few other things to be mindful of. You're going to be frequently adding cards to universities, to investments. You're going to be adding cards to your labs. And then there's another thing. Let's see if we can find one over here where we're going to go ahead and over here, we have this card over here, which is going to be another type of card. This over here is going to, this card over here, this symbol over here means take a card from the lab, take that specific card and put it into your agency. The problem with that is that ability, once utilized, gets covered up. So for example, if it's over here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the card, let's say we have another card further along, and when we first activate that, we're going to shift this card over to cover it up to indicate that we've used that ability in the game. So cards on the left are ongoing repeated bonuses. Ability symbols, icons on the right are going to be one-time use abilities in this game. And that is basically the high-level overview of Space Race. You're going through the rounds, you're playing your control cards, you're activating your abilities, you're managing the area control puzzle, you're adding more cards to the universe, you're taking those cards from the universe, you're adding them to your agency so you can cycle more and more abilities as much as you possibly can while you attempt to win Space Race. Which brings us to what I liked, didn't like, and can see others not liking in this game. And there's going to be a few things there. To begin with, the art is gorgeous in the game. The art overall really evokes that feeling of managing to capture both the time period of the space race while being very soft-spoken. It simultaneously has colors and feel to it. Like a good example over here is going to be this Cold War Spirit card, where you have kind of a color palette going on, but technically those soldiers don't really match. It has a very evocative artwork style that really speaks out in the game. The building out tableau gives you that sense of promise. Every round you get to do a little bit more than the rounds before. Not always a lot, because fewer cards than you might think actually have those left abilities that will give you repeated things to your agency. More often than not, you're manipulating where cards are going in terms of, for instance, these cards here let you add cards from your hand to your lab. That doesn't build up your agency, that just moves cards from your hands to your lab, which could be helpful in these two rounds over here, and it could be helpful if you get other cards that pull things from your lab to your agency, to your wherever. This one over here lets you move cards from your deck, from your hands, to your hand, or to your lab. Again, it's moving cards around, but it's not actually building out your agency further as you play. But there is a degree of tableau building in this game. There is a degree of making things more powerful as you slowly progress through it. And then the area control around the goals is going to be a fighting little puzzle going on in terms of both the breakthroughs over here, but more importantly, I don't appreciate the breakthroughs quite as much because there's usually less actual astronauts or placements going on over in the breakthroughs area. But over here in the project area gives you a lot to fight over and a lot of decision space around it too, because as you place astronauts down, you have to choose where you start your astronauts. But once you place an astronaut down, you can only move to the right. You can only start putting astronauts further out. So the further back you go, the more chances you have to start getting more and more astronauts in that zone before that project is closed out. And also to possibly take over from your opponent if they only have a handful. But if your opponent starts going here, they're going to get more points as they level up on that track. So it's a bit of a balance of, are you trying to place fewer higher valued astronauts, or are you trying to just fill up that board? And that decision of where to place and how to continue is going to depend on the cards you have as well at the same time. So I like that little puzzle of the projects here, as well as the project of the missions. Every round you have a different thing you're fighting for. Every round you have a different thing that you're scoring this round. So one round you can focus on, well, for example, the breakthrough. Although this particular set of projects actually has a lot of commonalities in terms of always scoring for your control center and always scoring for the area control. But different project decks are going to give you different mission decks are going to give you different systems of what you're fighting for each round, what's scoring you points this round versus next round, and how these projects are opening and closing. As far as what I didn't like in the game, to begin with, this is going to be a nitpicky one, but it is a complaint. The board is ridiculously large. Now, I don't mind large boards, but I do mind unnecessarily large boards. This is a board that takes up far more table space than it should, in my opinion. You can even just look at any of these cards here. The giant amount of space around each card, the giant lines in between each section, the giant area control area over here where you're only going to have a handful of astronauts even going on there. The projects are appropriately sized, those need to be what they are, but there's so much room they could have condensed on this board, making it significantly smaller, so this demands a lot of table space despite not really needing a lot of table space. Secondly, the tableau, while I appreciate that the tableau is giving me more to do every round, I don't appreciate that most of the tableau stuff comes down to fine, small little nuances in the game. This is not a game where you're playing out across 7 rounds and every single round your agency gets ridiculously large and you get to do more and more. This is a game where you have to earn and fight for every single card that enters your agency. Those are card abilities that let you add more cards to your agency, often involve covering them up at the same time. So the ones that give you the strongest benefits are often one-time use. The ones that give you little maneuvering from hand to hand, from this to there, are usually they're a lot more common. They involve moving things around, but they don't involve doing a ton of fun things. There's a lot of strategy in the game, don't get me wrong, but most of the tableau is fairly restrictive. It doesn't feel, it's a game where every time I play it, every time I try to play another control card, try to go for another strategy, I feel like this is the game where I'm going to do a lot. And it usually isn't. Usually this is the game where I get to play one card into my agency every single round. If I'm really lucky, I get a second card into my agency, and the rest of the time I'm manipulating and moving cards around to suit whatever goals. It offers me the promise of a tableau that lets me do a lot, but doesn't actually let me do a lot. And those cards, they never really feel like my cards. Between placing them in investments, between placing them in the lab, it feels like you have this access to tons of cards, and then most of the time they're not really even yours. You put them in the various other zones, not into your agency. Even the cards you get into your hand don't really go to you. They go into the general unexplored universe, and from there into the universe. So we're all sharing the same cards. We all have access to the cards, and it's going to come down to the turn order, to the control cards we play, to determine which cards we get. So that sense of ownership is rarely there, unless and with the exception of utilizing the abilities to move cards directly from your hand to other zones. But it's often a bit of a chore to move a card from your hand to your lab, and then from your lab into your agency. Most of the cards, that sense of ownership, most of the time, that sense of ownership over the cards never really came out. It's a lot of fiddling in this game for a very small return. The strategy's there, but a lot of fiddling for a very minor return. As far as what I can see others not liking in this game, to begin with is going to be the iconography. Now, this is not actually a problem with me, but in general, iconography is always a tricky balance. The idea that you have to look at this card over here, the idea that you have to take a look and say, well, what's going on there? Well, in this case, you're taking 2 cards from your hand. You're taking from your hand 2 cards, putting them into your lab. In this case, you're taking 2 cards from either the deck or your hand and putting them into your hand or the lab. So you have these options, these different cards. The way to read them is fairly basic. It's fairly simple once you understand it, but it will take a few rounds before you kind of start mentally looking at a card and understanding what it does off the cuff. So the iconography I can see being a problem for others. And then secondly, the area control. The area control is going to be present in the breakthrough tracker and the projects. While I particularly enjoy the projects, and I'm okay with it in the breakthrough tracker, if you're looking for an area control game, this isn't one that I define as such. It has a hint of area control in it as you play, but it's not going to be particularly impactful, especially in the breakthrough track where you're not going to have a ton of astronauts going on, so you're really moving them around for tiny returns that are often going to be broken by ties in terms of just not having a lot of astronauts in this zone over here. As far as final thoughts and rating for Space Race, Space Race is a game that has beautiful art, it has hundreds of ability-filled cards, and it has this tableau that you're building out that makes me want to think, it makes me think that I'm going to do more every time I play it. It makes me think that I'm going to get a lot done. And then I find myself fighting for small returns, for adding one more card here or there, for getting whatever small scraps I can out of this engine. It is a game that has strategy, but it makes me fight uphill for that strategy. A game it reminds me of a lot is going to be the Imperium Classics line. The Imperium Classics, Imperium Legends, which are well-rated games, which is relevant here. but I don't particularly love the genre of games where you have to work really hard for very small returns. If you're going to give me a tableau, if you're going to give me cards and abilities, I want them to be fun, to do lots of stuff. I don't want to feel like, oh, yay, I finally got an ability and now I'm going to cover it. So I got a card, I added it to my zone so that I can get a card and add it to my zone. Okay, great, fine. There's strategy, of course there is, because these cards are going to trigger other cards. Those cards are going to give you different control. They're going to give you points at the end of the round. And this time you can take a card from your lab that you may have not otherwise been able to get your hands on. There's definitely strategy as you go through it, but it feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle for very minor returns. As far as the rating for this one is going to be a 2 out of 5 for me. My rating scale is down below in the description, but a 2 is a game that I don't particularly want to play again. It does not mean it's a bad game, but it means it's a game that's not for me. It's an experience that I didn't enjoy, and I'm not in a rush to play this one again. Overall, this is Space Race. This is from Boardcubator. Until next time, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.